Thanks for tuning in to My Valley, His Victory, hosted by me, Mackenzie Smith, where I interview Christians who love the outdoors and have walked through valleys in their lives. In a world of highlight reels and surface-level relationships, we all have faced hardships. I believe our experiences can be encouraging to others if we have the courage to be vulnerable. 2 Corinthians 1 says, "The Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." My goal is to inspire you to come to the Creator through His creation and connect you with Christians who have been through similar experiences. I pray that this podcast encourages you if you are in a valley and pushes you to share how God has turned your past valley into His victory. Hey friends, I have a special announcement. I am hosting 2 The Wilderness and the Word events in 2025, July 23rd through 27th and August 13th through 17th. These are Christian women's retreats in Eureka, Montana, with Audrey from the Trail North. Our goal with these retreats is to bring together a group of women who want to worship the Creator in His creation. Over these 5 days, you'll meet like-minded women who want to grow in community, worship in the outdoors, and challenge themselves personally. I can't wait to hang out with you, so shoot me an email at myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com for more information or the registration link. Spots are filling up, so make sure and reserve yours today. On today's episode of My Valley, His Victory, we have Aaron Middleton. He says first and foremost, he is a follower of Jesus. He lives in the Ozarks Mountains of northern Arkansas with his wife Melanie, who goes by Lainey, their daughter Meredith, and their son Jake. He is a trooper with the Arkansas State Police, where he works as a criminal investigator, and his bride is a high school English teacher. They're very active in their church, serving the Lord through many different ways in ministries. In his free time, he enjoys hiking, fishing, hunting, camping, and traveling the USA with his family. Thanks so much for being with us today, Aaron.
Thanks. I'm excited. This is definitely a humbling experience for me. I never thought I'd be on a podcast or anything like that. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit more about yourself and who you are with the listeners?
Yeah. So lived in Arkansas my entire life, pretty much in this area of north central Arkansas. Grew up in a very small town. Where we live now is a rural area. The town I grew up in is Jasper, has about 500 people, and it's surrounded by the Buffalo National River. So growing up, that was always something that I did with my dad and my mom and my uncle. You know, we spent a lot of time camping and hiking, what a lot of people call spelunking, which we call it caving. We used to do a lot of caving. And then, you know, my parents, they were big on traveling. So we traveled the U.S. growing up. My parents were both teachers. My dad was a counselor. So we always had summers off. And I was able, before I turned 18, I traveled to 48 out of 50 states. So we went all over the place. And that's something that I'm very appreciative of, was that my parents were big on going places and seeing things. And, you know, I was able to get exposed to all kinds of different, you know, national parks and different states, different everything. And I grew up in a Christian home. I was blessed to grow up in a Christian home. And I accepted Jesus when I was 8 years old. I was baptized in the Buffalo River. So, yeah, I'm fortunate. I definitely had a good childhood and had a good upbringing.
Yeah. So fun that your parents were teachers, and so they both had every summer off, and you guys just got to travel around and see some really cool places. I feel like that is a very unique experience, and to get to see so much at such a young age, that's really cool. And I'm grateful for you that they got you all of those experiences. And man, that's just really special. I feel like, you know, I grew up in Kansas, but my mom lives in Arkansas, and so grew up in a lot of the same kind of work. We actually grew up like 45 minutes apart from each other, which is a little crazy. But I feel like a lot of people in Arkansas are kind of homebodies, and they kind of don't really travel and leave the state. And that's just kind of the mindset that I experienced. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but that I experienced when I was there. I know that my stepdad doesn't love to travel. Nobody in his family really loves to travel. And there's just something about growing up in Arkansas where you just kind of stay put. So I think that that's really cool. At that time, when you were young and traveling around with your parents, where was your favorite place or like your favorite state? You said you got to see 48 out of the 50 by the time you're 18.
Well, that's a tough one. Well, going back to what you were saying, everybody that we know that travels, that goes on vacation, they go to the beach. So you either go to Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, or Panama City, Pensacola. So people go to the beach, but as far as traveling everywhere else, don't see a whole lot of that. But favorite place, I would say we spent a lot of time at the Grand Canyon. We went to the Grand Canyon several times as a kid. I always enjoyed going there. When I was older, when I was in high school, and I think maybe my freshman year of college, my dad, my uncle, and I, and a few other people, we hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, camped on the bottom, and hiked back out from the South Rim side. We did that twice, and that's still one of my favorite experiences, as far as traveling. We went to Yellowstone a couple of times. I really enjoyed Yellowstone. I really enjoyed the South Dakota, the Black Hills in that area. But yeah, Grand Canyon was definitely one of my favorite places to go when I was a kid.
Yeah. So growing up in kind of a hiking, camping, exploring family, is this something that they did just with you guys as kids? Is this something that your parents are still actively doing or did actively, into your adulthood? Or kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
My parents, they still travel a lot. They don't do a whole lot of the hiking and different things like that. They don't do that anymore, but they still travel quite a bit. My uncle, he's retired. I spent a lot of time with him growing up as well. And he's out literally every single day. He's out somewhere walking through the woods along the Buffalo River. So yeah, another thing I grew up doing, I did a lot of hunting when I was became a teenager. Got into fishing, and I still do that some. I don't do it as much, but that was a big deal for me when I was, I would say, in my late teens and in my 20s. I did that. I kind of ventured away from the hiking, camping thing, and then did a lot more hunting and fishing. And then now I've kind of gone back to where I don't do as much of that, and I do a lot more hiking. So.
Yeah. I know that we had originally connected and you had reached out and said, hey, I'm coming to Utah with my family. What are some recommendations? And so I think that it is really cool too, that you are implementing what you got to experience as a child. And then now, getting your kids out and taking them on all of these super fun adventures as well. So what's kind of what have they caught the bug of at a young age?
They both love Colorado. We go to Colorado a lot. They both love going out there. They enjoy the hiking out there. They both love to camp. My bride's not as big on the camping. I'm still working on her a little bit. The kids love to go camping. It's funny because I asked them last night, we're trying to figure out where we want to go next year. And I asked both of them, before bedtime, I was like, where do you want to go next year? And both of them, I asked them separately, and they both said they want to go to the Grand Canyon. So that sounds like that's probably where we're going to go next year. But they enjoyed, when we went to Utah on that trip, they really enjoyed arches. My son Jake was absolutely, because he's a big Avengers fan, he was enthralled with the Thor's hammer hoodoo at Bryce Canyon. And so getting to see that was like the highlight of the trip for him. He thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah, that's super fun. I love Southern Utah so much. It's so unique, and just all the unique rock formations and all the things. I think it's super beautiful and just unique. I don't know. That's the best way I can explain it. There's not a lot of places in the U.S. that look like that.
Oh, for sure.
So we've talked a little bit about your outdoor hobbies and traveling and all of that fun stuff. Talk to us about how being in the outdoors and traveling maybe plays a role in your relationship with Christ.
So I've always been the type of person that I've always been someone that's more comfortable outdoors. Whether it be hiking, hunting, fishing, camping, all of those things. But recently, when I'm outdoors, this morning I went on a hike and I went to fairly popular place, but I got there early enough that there was nobody there. And literally, I mean, the whole time I was just praying while I was walking, just kind of having a conversation with God, and that's just where I don't know if there's something that I relax or what it is. There's something about being in God's creation. I've had conversations with friends with my pastor about this, that it can't be coincidental, that Jesus spent 40 years, or not 40 years, 40 days out in the wilderness. Jesus would go to the garden to pray, in solitude by himself. Moses encountered God, out in nature. King David, Elijah, all these different people. So I think there's just an innate attraction that God has. He just draws us to him, closer to him through his creation. So, it's just a special place to me. I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I can tell that when I've been too busy, that I haven't been able to get out and go on a hike or get in the woods, because I get really cranky and irritable and I'm just not focused. So it's like, I know when I get to that point, I need to get outside for a few hours.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that. I was feeling a little like that the other day, and I told my husband, I was like, we need to go on a walk. I need to, because I've been getting a little bit of the winter blues, and it's been cold and rainy and snowing already here in Utah. And
Wow.
I was just like, it's just not a time where you really want to go spend some time outside unless you're, skiing, and it's not there yet. We're not in that season yet, but I'm like, we need to go on a walk. I need to get out. I need some fresh air. I need to move. So I totally understand that. So I always like to ask this question. You said that you were, became a believer at the age of 8, and you've always kind of done outdoorsy things. At what point, if you can think of it, if you don't, it's okay too. I'm just always curious with people that have been believers their whole lives. At what point did nature become a special place in your relationship with God, or has it always been?
I would definitely say it. I would say it always has been, to a point. And we'll kind of get into it when I, share kind of my valley and my testimony a little bit later on. But, even though I've always loved to be outside, there was a time in my life that, I just was kind of a lukewarm Christian. So I didn't really connect being out in the woods with spending time with our Creator. But I remember, I think it was about 3 years ago, my family and I, we went on a vacation to Colorado with my sister and her husband, her family. And I got up early one morning. I was going to go on a summit hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. I was going to summit this mountain called Mount Ida. And this was kind of a new thing to me at the time. I wasn't really, since then, my wife and I have both gotten into going and summiting 14ers in Colorado. But at the time, I hadn't done that. And I just remember, I got up, started the hike before the sun came up, or as the sun was coming up. And I just remember when I kind of broke out of the trees and got above tree line, look down the valley, and there's bull elk everywhere. And, you look on one side and you can see the Never Summer mountain range. And then on the other side, you're going up the Continental Divide, and you can see, I think it's the Mummy mountain range on the other side. And I just remember almost getting knocked over just with the beauty, that I was experiencing. I was totally by myself, and that was just kind of a new thing for me. And, I say that I could hear God's voice, but I think probably I could just feel his presence like I'd never felt before. And ever since then, it's just been something that, I'll never forget that moment. And I've just kind of been hooked to it ever since, just getting in the mountains and, trying to get away from people if you can. It's hard sometimes, but just getting out in the mountains, I like sunrises and I like sunsets. So I like being out early in the morning, or I like, being out there a few hours before dark. It's a special time to me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. I know I kind of put you on the spot there. It's just always interesting to me, to learn Is this something that has always, you've been drawn to and you've connected to the Lord, or has it been, revealed to you in some other way? So,
Yeah.
Okay. If you could share a story with us about a way in which God has revealed himself to you in the outdoors, or maybe spoken to you.
Yes. So like last year, my wife and I, we were able to sneak away for a few days before Thanksgiving, and we went to Yosemite. And it was a place that I never went as a kid, that I'd always wanted to go, and we just never made it out there. And my wife and I went out there for a few days, just her and I. And I would say we love Colorado. We love Rocky Mountain National Park is one of our favorite places. But I would say that Yosemite may be our favorite national park that we've been to. And I know it's a special one for you. I've heard your story about it, but I just remember, we got to the tunnel viewpoint, and I remember being there. We got there early, 2 different mornings, and we could kind of watch the sunrise come up over tunnel view. And even though there's lots of people there, so you're not really having a moment of solitude, but just seeing just the vastness of, the Yosemite Valley, and there was fog in the valley. And it's just like, to me, I saw that and I thought, how could anyone doubt that we have a creator that created all this? And then, that was our first morning. We did some hikes. And then that evening, we went out to the meadow that's right beside, I think they pronounce it the Ahwahnee Hotel. And we sat down on a chair and we watched the sunset over Half Dome. And just the same experience, her and I, we just sat there. It's just the 2 of us. There weren't a lot of people, so we did have some solitude. And just being at the bottom of that valley and seeing those cliffs, it's just like I said, how could you doubt that we have a creator that created all these things? It didn't happen by happenstance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's too beautiful. It's too intricate. It's too vast.
Yeah.
It's too perfect in its imperfectness to be a happenstance. So yeah. Love Yosemite. Such a beautiful place. And thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot on this podcast about big trips. We talk about these super awesome places like Yosemite, but I would love for you to share just kind of how you maybe experience God or connect with God through creation on an everyday basis that could be applicable for someone who maybe doesn't get the opportunity to go and see these really crazy, beautiful places or go on these massive trips.
Yeah. So for me, what works for me is, it doesn't happen every day just because we get so busy, but I just try to get outside, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes. I try to get outside every day if I can. There's some days where, it could just be 10 minutes to go out in the yard and play basketball with my kids. In the summertime, it could be go jump in the pool with them. Or, kind of what we enjoy doing is just going for a walk through the neighborhood or going to the park and just going for a walk. I live in a more rural area. Still, to me, our town has, I think, 13,000 people, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a rural area. But I think if you live, somewhere, that's more urban, I think it's just important to get outside. No matter where you go, you're probably not too far from a national forest or a lake or a river or something. Just get outside and maybe find a quiet spot for a little bit of time, and just try to get outside, and even if you can't get outside to do that, if you can work on something, go water the garden or your flowers, just get outside and get some vitamin D. I think one of the problems our society has is that, so many people work their entire day inside and they never find, when they get off work and you move on to the next thing, and we just never find enough time to spend outside. So.
Yeah. I totally agree. Appreciate that. I know it's always helpful to hear the little things that we can incorporate in our everyday lives instead of, because those are honestly more important, the things that we do every single day. So thank you for sharing that. So, switching gears into the title of this podcast, My Valley, His Victory, would love for you to share either a valley or a season of wilderness that you walked through and just what God maybe taught you or prepared you for in that season.
Yeah. So, mine is more or less, it's probably just going to be a kind of a phase of life that I was in. Thankfully, not a large event or, a big something that happened to me. It was just more a phase of life where I was just a stagnant, lukewarm Christian. I was just kind of checking the boxes. So just to give a little backstory, after I graduated high school, I was very active in our church and our youth group, and went off to college. And then about my senior year of college, kind of just started drifting off the path a little bit, and, a little too much partying, drinking, stuff like that, just getting a little wild, which was outside of the norm for me because growing up, I wasn't that type of person. I joined the Army National Guard when I was a senior in high school. I did several years in the National Guard. So I was off on trainings and different things like that. And, that was just kind of the thing that you did when you're off when you're off at a school or you're off at a different location. There's not a whole lot else to do but drink. And, I kind of fell into that trap, and that just kind of continued. My wife and I got married, thankfully. Her and I went to different colleges, but we started dating in high school, and we were dating and engaged through college. And she has always, been the person to steer me. She was the person that helped steer me in the right direction. She kept me accountable, and I can't thank her enough for what she's done, the blessing that she's been in my life. But even after we got married, I'd kind of drug her into some of it, and, we just kind of partied. We didn't go to church as much as we needed to. And, I took the job that I have now, and we had to move a little ways away from what we would consider home. And we just never found a church. So for a year, we just never went to church. And, part of it was my schedule because I worked a lot of weekends, but we never found a home church. So if you're not surrounded by believers, if you're not surrounded by like-minded people, it's easy to fall into that trap. We eventually moved closer to home, and we started going to a different church that we had met a lot of friends at, and we had a really good core group of friends. We went there for a couple of years, and then that church split. There were some issues with the pastor, and that church split. So we went back to kind of the church where we had both grown up in. And through that time, we were very close with a lot of the people in the church, but I was just living a stagnant, lukewarm life. In one aspect, I was, to most people, I appeared to be a good person, but I just wasn't doing the right thing. I was living for the flesh and for myself. I didn't really think about my kids. I didn't think about my wife. I was just, kind of doing things for myself. If I wanted to go do something, then that's what I was going to go do. I was big into, I did a lot of hunting and fishing at the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, I was away from home a lot, and I was just a very selfish, fleshly person, and I wasn't living out the life that Jesus called us to live. And that's kind of where I wanted to read a passage in Scripture that kind of, the book of James has always been one of my favorite books of the Bible. There's so much packed into 5 chapters.
Me too. It's one of my favorite books by far.
I even remember as a teenager doing a Bible study on the book of James, and I was like, man, everything is packed in here. But one of the verses that, recently over the last, year or so that really convicted me, was James 2, chapter 14. It says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but not works? Can such faith save him? If a brother or sister is without clothes and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, stay warm, and be well fed,' but you don't give them what the body needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith, if it doesn't have works, is dead by itself. But someone will say, 'You have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without works, and I will show you faith by my works.' You believe that God is good. If you believe that God is one, good. Even the demons believe and they shudder. And later it says, chapter 26 says, for just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. And that's where I was for several years. I would say up until probably about 2 to 3 years ago, really. And like I said, we were going to church and we had a lot of friends in our church, but we weren't really active. And several years ago, we took on a new pastor, and the pastor that we took on just kind of stepped in very much as a role of mentor. He's a big mentor for me. And I remember not long after he came, my wife, Lainey, came to me and she said, hey, we have a thing called life groups at our church where, couples get together a couple times a month and, we just discuss, we have a Bible study, we discuss the sermons from the Sunday before, just whatever, you just do life together. She came to me and she said, what do you think about us being life group leaders? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Absolutely. Like, are you serious? Like me and you? And she's like, well, yeah, absolutely. And of course she's a teacher. So, she's used to talking in front of people. And, I thought about it, prayed about it, and I'm like, okay, this is outside of my comfort zone, but let's do it. And that was such a huge blessing for me because it forced me to step out of my comfort zone. It forced me to start taking those steps of not being, in a lukewarm bathtub as a believer. So we started leading a life group. And then I think the following year it would have been last year. Our pastor came to me and 11 other guys, and he said, hey, I want to start this mentorship program with 12 of you guys. We're going to read a book a month. We're going to do some exercises. We're going to meet once a month. And he's like, it's going to be tough. You can't miss any of the sessions, and you need to stay focused with this. And I thought, man, that's a tall order, but I'll do it. And that was one of the biggest blessings in my life, was to connect with 12 other men from all walks of life, from age 20 to 50. And, the second time we met, we shared our testimonies. And then from there, we just kind of grew into a brotherhood, really. And then this year we branched out, and I chose 6 other men, and we've been doing the same thing. And it's been just such a blessing on my life to be poured into, and then also to pour, to pour out as best I can to other men. Another significant thing that happened last year was a buddy of mine. He had been inviting me to this thing called Men's Encounter. He'd been inviting me for 4 or 5 years, and always, I like you said in my introduction, I'm a police officer, and so I always use the excuse of, man, I got to work this weekend. I can't go. I'm scheduled to work that weekend. So I would have had to take vacation. Of course, it was no problem for me to take vacation, to go hunting or to go on a trip or something. But I didn't want to take vacation, to go to this conference with my friend and other men. So I put him off and put him off and put him off. And finally, last year, he mentioned it to me, and I'm like, man, I don't know. And, I had since then changed jobs within my department to where I have weekends off. So I didn't have that excuse anymore. And Lainey says, she says, I really think you ought to go. He's been on you to go for several years. And I've never heard anybody say that they wish they hadn't gone. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'll go, and of course, we're on our way up there, and I'm like, oh, I could be doing so many other things. And I'll tell you, that was one of the most life-changing weekends of my life. It's just I don't even really know how to describe it. It's called Encounter Ministries. It's in Lebanon, Missouri. It's in Camdenton, Missouri. They do weekends for men. They do weekends for women called Ashes to Beauty. And it's just a 48-hour, best I could call it, as a marathon. There's 14 different sessions that go over just different topics of our beliefs. And it's all testimony based. So it's similar to what you're doing. It's you get people up and they talk about their valleys, and then they talk about how God delivered them from what they've gone through. And it just, there's a moment through there to where I don't want to give away too much for anybody that might listen, that might go one day, but you kind of write down, the sins that you've done or the issues that you're having in your life. And then you go nail it physically, you nail it to the cross. And the things that I was dealing with, the way I was acting outside of church, the language I was using, the gossip, just the negativity that I had in my life. I put those things down and I went and nailed it on the cross. And I just prayed. I said, Lord, I want this to stay here. I'm not going to take this back home with me. I want these things to stay here. And since that time, I still mess up daily, mess up every day. But since that time, I've definitely been changed for sure. I went back again this past year, and it's funny, the things that, the Lord convicted me of the first time, the second time I went, maybe they didn't necessarily hit me hard, but then there are these other things that the Lord brought us, like, you need to be better about that. And, recently my wife went, and she came back, and it definitely changed her as well. She went to the women's version. And, something that the Lord had been convicting me of was being bold in my faith and sharing my faith. And that's just something that I've always, I didn't want to, I guess fear of rejection, talking to somebody about my faith and then having rejection. And she came back, and just the boldness that she had was an inspiration to me. And so that's been what God's, laid on my heart lately, is to be bold, not to fear, and just boldly share his faith. And through that time that we were living in a stagnant life, we had so many, we had different things happen. My wife went through some postpartum depression, and it really opened my eyes to that, because I'd never dealt with depression, and seeing her go through these things, it opened my eyes to the reality of it. And that's a story for her to tell. Maybe one day she'll come on here and she can tell her story, because she's got an amazing story too. But I'm just so thankful to have her by my side through all this, because she's held me accountable throughout our marriage. We've been married for going on 14 years, and got 2 awesome kids. And I guess, what really hammered it home for me of, that these changes that I've made, which over the last couple of years, we've had things happen. I was involved in a pretty bad car wreck, or our family was, it was kind of hard, really hard for my wife and my kids and me in some ways, but through that all, something that just kind of hammered home how important it is to be bold and to live out a life, trying to model your life after Jesus. It really came around this year. Back in the spring, we were sitting on the couch. We started watching The Chosen, all the seasons, and we watched it together as a family. And we were sitting there on the couch, and our son especially, he's one that he picks up on things really easily. And we were just sitting there watching it, and just kind of out of the blue, and I don't really know, it was something that he had to have been pondering. And he said, "Dad, what do I need to do to get baptized?" And, the episode hadn't really dealt with baptism or anything. And of course I'm like, what? Just out of the blue. And so we paused it, and we told him, hey, well, you need to understand that you're a sinner, that you've done wrong. And you need to understand that without Jesus in your life, then you'll have no direction. And without Jesus in your life, you can never spend eternity in heaven with him. And we sat there and we discussed that with him. And he said, well, I'm ready to accept Jesus, and I'm ready to get baptized. So we sat there and prayed with him, and we were able to baptize him in the Buffalo River this summer. And then later on this summer at Vacation Bible School at our church, our daughter accepted Jesus, and she just got baptized this past weekend. And if anything, to me, has hammered home the importance of being bold and of being a leader to your family, being a Christ-like leader to your family. that just right there showed me, how important it is, because, had I not shown a good example, they wouldn't have asked those questions. They wouldn't have pondered those thoughts. And so it just kind of made me, it kind of makes me ashamed for how I was. But, something that I've come to realize is that God's timing is perfect. And all of that happened for a reason. It's just, just creating my story. And I hope someone else can, relate to my failures and, can take it away and the good can come from it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know we chatted before, and you had said, what you said at the beginning, my story isn't one of, something crazy happened to me or, whatever. But I said, I think that topics like these, even though, they're not, some of the life altering stories that we've had on this podcast are so important, because I think just so many people either have walked through a season of being lukewarm in their faith, or know somebody that has, or, has been impacted by this in some way. And so I think that this topic is so valuable because it is kind of a part of the world that we live in right now. We have a lot of what I'll call cultural Christians, or, people that are not boldly sharing their faith or living out their faith. And there is a level of that has impacted, I think the way that Christianity is viewed as well. And so I think that this topic is really important. So I just want to say thank you for sharing all of that.
Absolutely.
I think that it's really cool that your wife came to you and was like, hey, let's lead a small group. Because even though you may not have felt equipped in that moment, there's no better way to equip yourself than to kind of have to do it. Yeah. And I think, I've been in a lot of places where it's like, I don't feel like I'm ready to do that. But honestly, I don't know that I would say that I'm ever ready to do that. Yeah. And so in some things in life, there's a ripple effect that happens the opposite way that we want it to. It's like, I need to feel ready and then I can do this thing. And it's like, sometimes you got to do the thing and you got to figure it out along the way. And, you gotta jump. And so I think that that's valuable that you shared, like, I don't think we were ready, but we did it. And that you can look back at that moment and be like, that's something that changed my life.
Mm-hmm. And what you said just kind of brought me back, and I've said it multiple times. I've heard it said so many times, is God is he's great at taking the underdog and turning them into the winner. He did it with Moses. He did it with David. He did it with Jonah. All these people that, Jonah ran away. He said, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And, and then God intervened. So he's great at taking people that the world says are flawed and aren't equipped, like you said, and using them for his glory. It's just, that's what he does. And what better example of our God, if he used the best of the best, if he used the Michael Jordan to do all the stuff, it's like, well, that's Michael Jordan. Of course he's going to be great at it, but, if you use, the boy, like David, just using the underdog constantly over and over again, so many examples. So yeah, just like what you said.
Yeah. And I think he puts opportunities in front of us that we know are, God calling, like, you leading a small group, that's, that's pretty significant for God to be like, hey, like, you do this. But I think so often it's just, he's giving us opportunities to be obedient. Mm. And then it's like, I'll figure out the rest. I just need you to say yes to my plan and to the opportunity that I'm presenting yourself. And like, yeah, I think just so often he presents us with opportunities and we're like, God, can you fix this? Can you fix this? And it's like, he's giving you an invitation, but you do have to say yes. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah, that's so good. What you said, because that's, I've got a friend that's what he always says is somebody will ask him something and he just says, I'm just being obedient to the Lord, and it's like, that's just be obedient and be bold. And if you'll do that, then God will sort it out. If you don't know what you're doing and he's calling you to do it, be obedient and do it, and if you're not sure, then jump in the Bible and read about it, because there's so many examples. That's what, if someone says, well, I just don't feel, I don't feel like, I don't hear the Lord speaking to me about something. It's like, well, open up your Bible and start reading, because I guarantee you, he will lead you to a passage that's relatable to you, and he will speak to you through that passage. I guarantee it'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, you going to that encounter men thing, it's like you kept getting the invitation, you just had to say yes. And then, at that event, you were able to really work through and drop some things, at the cross and give them to God.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Aaron, for someone who may be in that season of being lukewarm, not really honoring what God has called them to do, or, not really being obedient to the word, hasn't fully lost their faith, but definitely just like isn't living for Christ. What piece of advice or word of encouragement would you give to someone in that same season?
I think a big important thing to me is surround yourself with believers. I was fortunate enough to, I'm married to a wonderful, Christ follower. And so she helped redirect me, at different points in my life. But also with that, I surrounded myself with who I would consider to be men of God. And I think that's where the ball started rolling for me. I'm a slow learner, so it took a few years for me to really catch on. Hopefully, but people learn faster than I do. But I think a big important thing is just to surround yourself with like-minded believers, and believers that'll call you out. If they see that that you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, people that will call you out and kind of just redirect you and point you in the right direction. That's a big one. And I say that in so many ways. The people that you surround yourself with can either make you or break you. I read a book. One of the books that we were reading was by Craig Groeschel. It's called The Power to Change. And one of the quotes that he said in that book was that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And that was the biggest thing that I took from that book. I'm like, wow, that is so true, because, if I look at the times when I was straying from, when I had strayed away from God, I just wasn't surrounding myself around believers that were, calling me out, that were lifting me up, that were epitomizing, a walk with Christ. So that's a big one. Get in the Bible, read your Bible, even if it's only for a few minutes. Make some time, make 5 minutes to sit down and read your Bible. In the morning is preferred, because it's a way to get your day started. But if that doesn't work, just read your Bible and then pray. My prayer time often, obviously, I pray in the morning, I pray in the evening. I pray with my wife. I think that's an important thing to do, is pray with your spouse if you're married. I pray with my kids when I put them to bed. But when I'm the job that I do, I'm constantly in a vehicle driving down the road all the time. But that's when I spend a lot of time in prayer. It's just when I'm just driving down the road, because I'm just going from point A to point B. So that's when I pray. And then when I'm out in creation and solitude, that's when I pray too. But those 3 things: surround yourself with the right people, get in your Bible, and spend time in prayer. That would be my encouragement if you are feeling in a stagnant, lukewarm, spot in your walk with Christ.
Yeah, I think those things are so good. And I know we've talked about it before, but I always say if it comes up multiple times, then it's probably something we need to pay attention to. And who you surround yourself with matters. And, I have a pastor that I listen to often, Jonathan Pukaluta, and he talks about dating, and he's like, go and find the godliest man or woman that you know, and, try to date that person. And I think that's also the case with like friends. Like if you, need godly friends, go and find godly friends and go, I know it's bold, but go and ask to be part of community.
Yeah.
Because I think that it does matter, and your friends are going to drag you into your old habits.
Yeah.
And especially if those are friends that you used to do, sinful things with, and they're not changing, they're going to continue on the same trajectory that they've always been on. And so it's okay to cut people out of your life. Sometimes it can be for a season, just so that you can get a grasp on what you need to handle and be able to, set boundaries and say no to certain things. And sometimes there are people that, just don't need to be in your life, and that's okay. I think we think that that's like really cutthroat, but it's just like, hey, we don't have the same interests. We don't have the same values. We don't, XYZ. It's okay.
I think to your point, if you do, kind of, for lack of better terms, cut ties with those people who were bringing you down, if you don't cut it completely, they're still going to see you, in passing, or, they'll see you on social media, whatever. And they'll be like, what changed about you? We used to do X, Y, and Z, and now you don't do that anymore. What's changed? What's the difference? And that can open a door to where you can share Christ with them. So I think it's not wrong to, cut ties in that manner. And even you look in the Bible, so many people, they had at least one other person or multiple people that they, Moses and Aaron, Joshua and Caleb, even Jesus had 12 other, guys that he surrounded himself with. Community is important. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing and stepping out on a limb, because I know you said that this was way out of your comfort zone. So I just want to honor you in that, and, just feeling that tug on your heart to share and to break out of that comfort zone a little bit and do something a little bit different. So just want to say thanks again, and would love for you to share with the listeners where they can connect with you or find you on social media or wherever it is you live on the internet.
Yeah. So probably I'm on Instagram. It's A Middleton 611, A Middleton 611. That's my Instagram. You can follow me on there. I keep, you'll have to send me a request. I keep it private just because of my job. And, if you're friends with me on there, you see I post a lot of pictures of my kids and my wife. And so I do that. I'm also on Facebook, Aaron Middleton. I'm not on there as much, but Facebook or Instagram, feel free to send me a follow request. I put lots of pictures of, hiking and doing different things, and you're probably going to see a lot of stuff with my wife and kids on there too. But yeah, that's where you can find me on social media.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me. It was, like I said, I was a little nervous about it, but I feel a lot better now. So thanks again.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of My Valley, His Victory. If you or someone you know are interested in being on this podcast, please email myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com.